Hey everybody, it's Coach Goodrich here with another 8th grade American history video. This is going to be Unit 4, Part 2, which is dealing with the Constitution and the formation of our national government. As you see, this is going to be ratifying the Constitution. Talked about early federalism and the start of all this, and now we're going to get into a couple more details about this. This video should be relatively short, so pay attention because here we go. Alright, ratification. All ratification means is voting. It is a basic generic word for voting, and you need to have a certain number in order to pass. So they talk about ratifying a bill, ratifying a law, ratifying the Constitution. It's just voting. It's the same basic thing, just on a document or set of rules. So number one, who are the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists? Federalists were for the ratification of the Constitution. They supported a strong central government. These are going to be people like John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, yes, but he's going to kind of transfer his allegiance later on to the Democratic Republicans, and John Jay. Anti-Federalists were people who were opposed to the ratification because they were worried about a strong central government and having weaker state governments than the national government. They argued that this was kind of like what we already fought against in Great Britain. We didn't want one person or one group of people to have all the power, or else we would just be starting the same vicious cycle over and over again. People that were like Anti-Federalists were Thomas Jefferson, John Hancock, Patrick Henry. But let's talk about the two biggest ones at the forefront of this. George Washington is sometimes called a Federalist, or maybe a Whig, depending on what history book you're reading from. He really didn't have a political party. In fact, he preached repeatedly, and then again at his farewell address, that he urged people not to get into political parties because he thought that, kind of what's happening today and what's happening ever since then is that you got people that are just going to stay either as a Democrat or a Republican or a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist, and they'll never be able to make a compromise with anybody that doesn't believe exactly the same thing as what they do. And that can be dangerous, and you kind of see the echoes of that right now. He kind of saw that coming. So John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson started off as very good friends, grew to hate each other, and then became very good friends again when they died. In fact, they both died on the same day, on July 4th, in like 1826. Just within a couple hours of each other. Became lifelong pen pals towards the end of when they retired. John Adams was a Federalist, wanted a strong central government. He wanted to ally with Great Britain. Thomas Jefferson was an Anti-Federalist, wanted a weak central government, strong state governments, and wanted to be more like France. And from there, when they were designing pretty much how this country was going to run, it tore their relationship apart. So what are some of the issues that are involved in the ratification debate, trying to get the states to agree to do this? You have the strength of the national government versus the strength of the state governments. The process itself, there was 13 states that were 13 colonies before this, and 9 of the 13 had to ratify. God is not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. That upset some people. There are references to a creator, kind of like what Thomas Jefferson had in there, and moral law, which would be given by a moral lawmaker, but God is not explicitly mentioned. Same thing with slavery. You have states that could not print their own money because the Federalists wanted everyone to have the same currency, which makes sense now. And then a lack of a guaranteed Bill of Rights. The whole idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that was promised and cannot be taken away in the Declaration of Independence. Why is that not mentioned anywhere? So Anti-Federalists had a hard time with that. Now the Federalists had what were called the Federalist Papers, which were a series of essays written by Alexander Hamilton, mostly Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, to try and convince people, hey, we need to push our representatives in order to sign so that we can be a united nation, and we can figure out the rest of the details, kind of figure it out later, why being unified was a good idea, and they are largely responsible for why the large state plan, the Virginia plan, was so successful. On what two states did the success or failure of ratification depend? The two most populous states, Virginia in the south, New York in the north. So there were actually 3 national capitals before it ended up in D.C. While Washington, D.C., and the city of Washington was being literally built, created. New York City from 1789 to 1790. Philadelphia from 1790 to 1800, and Washington, D.C., starting in 1800 until the present day. John Adams would be the first president to live in what is now known as the Executive Mansion, or what was called the Executive Mansion, what we now know as the White House. According to the voting laws, the nation's first president and vice president, George Washington, and the second place vote getter, John Adams. He was sworn in on April 30th, 1789. That date was then moved back to March 4th, and now the inauguration date of any new president is January the 20th, pretty early in the fiscal year. Some of the requirements: you have to be at least 35 years old, you have to be a natural-born citizen of the United States, and you have to be a resident of the United States for at least 14 consecutive years before that. For the vice president, they're also known as the president of the Senate. So if they have to cast a deciding vote in the Senate House, they can do so. And he is supposed to take over for the president if the president becomes disabled or is unable to do their job in either way. What did the Federalists hope the new Constitution would give the country? Strong leadership, balances of power, and overall happier people. What were the Anti-Federalist fears about the Constitution? Main ones were no Bill of Rights, which would be added later, and too much judicial, legislative, executive. This is funny. Too much centralized government crap, as you can see down here. I wish there was a nicer way to put it. There's really not. Boom. So if you needed a further breakdown of what this was looking like, you can pause the video here and read about Federalists, Anti-Federalists, and the process of ratification. Eventually, you see down here, James Madison drafts 10 amendments to the Constitution, or changes that become the first 10 Bill of Rights, or first part of the Bill of Rights. And you guys will watch those a little bit later on. But this, pretty easy, short and sweet to the point. There will be a short mini quiz that will be posted on Google Classroom that you guys will take for your grade. And I look forward to talking about this more with you later.